prompt you with questions or anything, or?
It's a start.
Okay. All right?
Yep, we're all good.
Okay, first of all, I want to go way, way back to Granny, my great-grandmother, who lived in Pryor, Oklahoma, right next door to Grandma and Granddaddy Utley. There was quite a space in between the two houses, enough to put another house, but they had grass there and a sidewalk going between the two houses. The first house that Granny had burned down because she accidentally left an iron on something she was ironing, and it was the kind of iron, of course, that she used in the coal stove. Put one on the stove, used that, put the second one on to heat, and I don't know, somehow she got sidetracked. So the house burned to the ground, but they were able to save her with no problem. So they built another house back, and it was small. It was 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, no tub, just a shower. But for those days, it was a newer house, where most of them in Pryor were old. So one day, when we were out there visiting in the summertime, Margie was out playing with some other girls who, I was the oldest one, so she was there with some younger ones, and I was sitting around with Mother and Grandma and saying, I don't have anything to do. And Mother said, well, why don't you go over and talk to Granny? Now, Granny had hardening of the arteries. She was quite old, and hardening of the arteries is the same thing that we call dementia these days. But she had quite a memory for her early life. Mother had already told me that her mother was married to an Indian chief. I don't know what kind of Indian, because she lived in, I believe, Georgia. And she told me that when they were young, the Civil War was going on, and they had taken all of their valuables and put them into a wooden trunk and buried it in the backyard, because whenever the Yankees, the Yankees came through, they would take everything, the life, the chickens, the everything. So right after the war ended, a lot of people started moving west, including them. There was the Trail of Tears. I don't know if she was involved in that particular one, but she went in a covered wagon. They took all of their belongings, and they ended up in Oklahoma. So she lived the whole rest of her life there. Even though she was old, she kept a garden. There was a huge garden in the back. She had hers, and Grandma and Granddaddy had theirs. And they would can almost everything, and there was a tornado, what do you call them, dug in the ground, with you only see the top of it. And that's where they kept all of the canned goods, because it was cool. And sometimes Margie and I'd have to go in there and get them, and we didn't like to because it was all spidery and everything. But anyway, she cooked her own food, and I remember every time I'd go into her house, I would smell prunes. And she would take prunes every morning, being an older person, and she would put them on the stove with some water and get her prune juice for breakfast. So that smell was there all the time. She, I don't know where she lived in the early days there in Oklahoma, but it might have been in Pryor, I don't know. But she definitely was part Indian. I don't know if it was Cherokee or where she was living, whatever the Indian population was. As we say now, Native American, right? So she told me that story, and I have remembered it from that time. And so with the first house had 2 bedrooms, and when we'd stay with Grandma and Granddaddy, Mother and Daddy would sleep over there. And Grandma Utley never knew that Mother was a smoker. And so when she'd go over to Granny's, she would smoke. And
did Bob smoke too, or just being?
Oh yeah, they both did. But it's okay for a man to smoke, not a woman.
Interesting.
And not her woman, for sure.
Right.
So Mother went to high school, and she always wanted to go to college. But what happened was, just as she graduated from high school, the Depression hit, and Granddaddy lost his job. He was working on the roads at that particular time.
And this is Utley? This is
Granddaddy Utley.
Okay.
And so Mother worked at the, Pryor was the county seat, so she worked at the county office. And she also worked at night. She had taken 9 years of piano, and she played the piano when the silent movies were playing.
Oh, wow.
And that was one of her favorite things to do.
This is Beemaw we're talking about.
Yeah.
This is Beemaw. So she did mention, after we found out she'd been adopted, that one day she was at the county clerk's office, and she normally greeted people as they came in. And this one woman came in, and Mother said it was like looking in a mirror. And this gives me cold chills now. And her boss came up real fast, and she said, "Lucille, I have some work for you to do back here," and took her back. And so she thinks that probably was a sister of hers, or a cousin. Could have even been a twin sister. But she was put in an orphanage at a very young age, and they adopted her at 6 weeks old. You probably know that.
I didn't know the year that she got adopted. I knew she was adopted at a young age, but I wasn't sure how young she was.
And Grandma had had 2 miscarriages prior to adopting her, and she was a tiny woman. She was barely 5 feet, and I think maybe that was part of the problem. Granddaddy Utley was 5'7", and Mother was 5'9".
Yeah.
And he used to tease her. It was terrible about, "Oh, you're so tall, you're more like a man," and she'd say, he put his slipper out in front of him, take it off, and he says, "Your feet are even too big for my slippers." I mean, that was really cruel, I thought. But anyway, he was a good man, and he took care of his family. And one of the stories that Mother told me about him was, there was a sign going into Pryor, "Don't let the sun set on a Negro in this town." No, they said nigger.
Yeah.
And so if they weren't out of town by dark, they couldn't be arrested. Well, there was this one, so they had the Ku Klux Klan there.
Yep.
And everyone was expected, every man was expected to be a member of it. And at that point in time, Granddaddy had come up with this great idea because cars were new and they didn't have a roof, that he bought a piece of property or an old building in the middle of the city, the town, I guess, and he rented it out as a garage at night so that they didn't have to put their car in the barn or someplace like that. And it was going very, very well. I don't know what time frame this was, but one night, and Mother said she heard all of this, Granddaddy's friends, who he would meet down at the drugstore, and they had pinball machines, things like that, came all dressed in their white and their pointed hats and everything, and said, "Come on, Billy, we got this nigger, young nigger down here that was looking at some woman the wrong way, and we're going to go out and tar and feather him." And Granddaddy said, "No, I'm not going." And they said, "Oh, come on now, you better join us. There'll be consequences if you don't." He said, "I don't care what the consequences are, I'm not going to be involved in that." Now that was something that took a lot for him. These are good friends of his. And finally, they gave up and they walked away. I have no idea what happened to the boy. They probably still went ahead with their plan. But Granddaddy got up the next morning and went over to the garage, and every one of them had pulled their car out.
Yeah.
And put him out of business. Had you heard this story?
No, but it was obvious, like that. There's consequences for not going with the flow when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So then he got the job with the roads, and worked on it. It was Route 69 went right through there, and that's where Daddy worked.
Yeah.
When he met Mother, he was staying in a room someplace.
Engineer. He was engineer. He was an engineer on the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, then going back to Daddy now, he had a degree in engineering, and just before the war, not too long, maybe a year, he got a job down in Texas with a company called Star Engineering. And we moved down there, Mother and I and Daddy, and he was working really long hours, but he was getting good pay. One time when we were down there was a hurricane, and I was just a baby at the time, maybe a year old, something like that. I was in the crib. And it was a pretty bad one, and I don't know what kind of house it was, but it started leaking. And Mother said that it would start leaking in the crib, and they'd have to move the crib someplace else, and then it would leak there, and they'd have to move again. And Roy Saunders, who was a friend of them from prior, was visiting at the time. And he said, "Well, I'm going to get in my car and drive back up to Oklahoma." And he was crazy to do it, and they finally talked him out of it because he went out the front door, and there was this telephone wire electric wire just going like this, floating in the air and sparking. And he came back in, he said, no, I'll change my mind and stay here. But anyway, got through that pretty easily. And because of all the work that was involved, and Daddy was working nights even sometimes and had no time with us, the war came along and he decided to enlist. And because he was college educated, I don't know if he went in as a captain. Did you ever hear, Des?
He was a lieutenant. He was a
Officer.
Officer.
First lieutenant,
He was an officer.
So maybe he went in as a lieutenant and then became a captain.
He did.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, we moved to Fort Knox in Kentucky. When we first moved there, there was nothing available on the base, and we had to go out, way out on a highway outside of a little town called Elizabethtown, which we called E-Town. And we were on the highway. We moved into the house. There was a sink in the kitchen and some plugs, and I guess there was a little refrigerator. No cabinets whatsoever. So Mother took orange crates, the wooden ones, and stood them up on end, and Daddy secured them to the wall, and she made little curtains on little rods to open them, and they stored in there. And she did quite a bit. She made curtains for the kitchen window, and we had a little yard, and we had the dog named Spotty, which I named, all black, no spots. They asked me why. I said, I like the name. Anyway, he got hit by a tank because the tanks would go up and down that road. It seemed like every day, but I guess it was every time they were going to have some kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, training or something like that. And it was cold there. And we lived there for, I guess, about, well, it was at least a year before they finally had housing on site. So we moved there, and Mother was pregnant by this time. And we had our own house, and it was a sturdy house, and it was, with neighbors around, and that's how we met Pete and Pauline. They were a neighbor, and they started playing bridge together, and they were friends forever after that. And that's where Margie was born, and Grandma Utley came when Margie was born and stayed for a while. It had been a difficult delivery. She was a breech, but she survived fine. And some of the home movies now that are there are from that home. And I remember one time we went for a walk. It was a big base, but I think maybe Mother even drove. And we stopped and we were walking around, and we watched a plane coming in on fire, really low, and finally it made it to the runway, but just barely. And I had asked what happened to the pilot, and no one told me, so I don't know. Sometimes Vince would come. He was in the service too. And there was another friend, and I can't remember his name, but they would fly in and say to Daddy, well, I'm off now, why don't you come and we'll go someplace. and he would do it occasionally. Well, one time he did it, and this was when Mother was about 7 months pregnant, even 8. You know, she delivered, Margie was quite late. She was that way through her life, as you know.
Yes.
And Daddy took the keys to the car and put them in his pocket. And we got back in the car and no keys. We looked all over. We looked in Mother's purse. We couldn't find them. And she just sat there and she started crying. And I was trying to comfort her. It's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. And so she finally got out of the car and we walked to the closest place where anyone was. And Mother told the guy the problem. And he said, "Oh, okay, I can fix your problem." He just went in and he used the hot wire. But, and we finally got home. But when Daddy got home,
Daddy was in trouble.
that was not good.
Yes.
That was not good. One day, he came home, and you know, he was a teaser, and he said to Mother, "Well, it's finally happened. I'm gonna have to go overseas." And she burst into tears, and he says, "It's okay, it's okay. I was only teasing." Well, he had a hard time after that too.
Oh yeah. You don't tease about that.
One day.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Huh?
I'd love to hear if you have any memories of how they first met and how that went, and like their dating period. That would be interesting. Like when they were dating.
Okay, I will go back to that then. And I just wanted to say one more thing, or two more things actually. This is. Oh, okay. Okay.
You're doing a good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One time, Daddy brought home a little bunny.
Oh, what?
A bunny.
Okay.
And Mother said, "No, we're not going to keep a rabbit." "Oh, it's so cute. I thought you'd really like it." No rabbits. And so he had put it down on the floor, and it went in behind the refrigerator. And it couldn't get it out, so he had to pull the refrigerator out and get the bunny. And I guess he put it in something and took it back the next day. He was a sleepwalker.
Really?
He was a really bad sleepwalker. One time he went out the front door, shut the front door, which locked automatically, and couldn't get back in when he woke up. And he had to go around to the window where Mother was sleeping and knock on the window to wake her up. She didn't know he was gone, and he had to come in. I don't know, I guess he didn't come in through the window.
Yeah.
She went around and opened the door. But supposedly that was one of the reasons they didn't send him overseas.
Interesting.
Okay, so,
He told me flat feet.
well, that too.
Yeah.
He had flat feet from playing so much tennis. But, so that leads me into one more thing before I go back. What he did, they gave him a job to run the mess hall. And the workers there, he ran the kitchen, and the workers there were almost entirely black, and they had come up from the South, joined the Army, and many of them were uneducated, but they knew how to cook, and so that went fine. But when harvest time came, many of them would say, "Okay, I have to go back home and do the harvest for my family so they'll have food." and Daddy had said, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you can't. You signed up, you have to stay, and if you try to leave, they will arrest you. And they just didn't understand the concept, and he said it would just broke his heart every time he'd have to tell one, no, you can't. And then they would contact, and their family would say, you know, the corn is just dying off because there's no one to harvest it. And so that was something that really bothered him.
Yeah.
So, okay, the courtship, I don't think it was very long. He was working on the roads in Pryor, and he saw Mother in the, what is it called, soda shop.
Yep.
And he was with a friend, and he said, I told the friend right there, I'm gonna marry that girl.
Oh, wow.
And he started asking her out, and they ended up getting married in Grandma and Granddaddy's living room.
So what year, that would have been
That has been, I think it must have been 23, because I was
23?
born in, when she was 23, I was born when she was 24, and I often wondered if I was conceived out of wedlock. But at one time, I did the math. I think, did you help me with that sometime? No, it was kosher.
So this is 39 you're talking about.
1939. She was 23.
She was
23, 24, yeah, 1939.
Okay, just one more. You were talking about the plane flying into Pryor, and everyone was.
It was flying into, on the base.
Firing one, or the one that was.
Oh, the one that they
the
didn't.
one, yeah, the big.
They never
I was in
heard
the
it?
kitchen, and yeah, this is a separate story, but
Yeah.
tell that
Downtown.
again. In Pryor.
Everyone went out to see the plane.
Yeah, tell that story again, because that wasn't on tape.
Oh, it wasn't? It was?
No, I was in the kitchen. Not the one that came out of fire. The one in Pryor.
Okay, they were told in Pryor that there was gonna be a plane going over the town.
This
In
must
the
have been like the
afternoon.
20s. The 20s or the 30s?
It must have been.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the whole town came to Main Street, and they started looking up to see the plane. And they were all wandering around looking up, and then finally they heard a noise, and it was the plane. They didn't realize it was going to make noise.
So they stood around all day looking up at the sky,
Yeah.
looking for the plane.
Okay.
This is back in the day. This is before you were born.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well before. Oh, Mother, one of the things that Mother did was she would drive the car when she was about 9 years old. And
I
she'd
remember her
go to
telling me this.
town, and she would get, you know, what she needed, usually like groceries or something. Granddaddy had trained the dog, Lucky, to go to the meat store, which was just down the road, and it was down the alley actually, and get meat at the meat store and bring it back home.
Like, how did he get it? Like in his mouth, or?
Yeah, in the mouth, and the
Was he
butcher
stealing it?
knew that when the dog came in, or was at the
Yeah.
door, he'd let the dog in, and I don't know if there was, well, Granddaddy
Paper.
probably called first to give him the order, and the dog would bring the food back.
Like in a bag, or?
I'm sure it was wrapped.
Yeah, oh
It's
yeah,
probably
it
wrapped.
would have been wrapped in paper in those days.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And Lucky also was, he'd take hunting. He was the bird dog that, you know, so he helped with that. Granddaddy, almost when we were there, and probably the whole year, almost every Sunday,
This is Granddaddy Stevens?
Utley,
Oh, okay.
yeah. I'll get to the Stevens family later, but I know more about the Utley family. They would, okay, let me think a second. Oh, they had chickens, and they would take, so many eggs and let them hatch, so they always had chickens. So Granddaddy would put Grandma out on that path between the two houses in a chair with her apron on and a tub of hot water. Granddaddy would take the chicken, wring its neck,
Yeah.
throw the mouth to Lucky, throw the head to Lucky, and we would watch the chicken run around. We thought it was funny, but it wasn't really funny. He'd bring the chicken, put it in the hot water, and Grandma would pull all the feathers out, and they'd go, flying in the air. And we'd go in and we'd either have chicken and dumplings or fried chicken or something like that.
Wow. That's how it was done.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's how it was done.
But
No plastic back then.
In 10 years, it's how it will be done too.
this one chicken kind of took to Mother, and she kept it as a pet. And she kept it for a long time. And she went out one day looking for it and couldn't find it. And
Dinner.
it was dinner
It
that
was dinner
night.
that night.
And Granddaddy, they started serving the chicken, and Mother started eating it. And I don't know what the chicken's name was. Just say it's Mary. Mary tastes pretty good, doesn't she?
He was,
So I think it's time to stop, because I agree with you, Steve. I can only go so far.
yeah, it gets tough on your throat.
I don't know